If only that was the end of the police's obsessive pandering to transphilia. But by all accounts, they're just getting started. We all know that anyone who dares criticise the most pampered and protected of identity groups can expect to be outed as a hate criminal and pursued enthusiastically by our minority-obsessed police. But what about those criminals who identify as being transgender? How do the police and the courts deal with criminals who use their minority status and victim credentials as a means to get soft treatment and a lighter sentence? Take sex offenders, for instance. Sexual abuse by women against children has increased by a massive 84% in the past few years. Any idea why this is? Go on, take a wild guess. And don't you dare say it's due to an increase in men claiming to be women, because that would be transphobic, and that has nothing to do with it. Actually, it has everything to do with it, because half of all transgender prisoners are sex offenders or dangerous Category A inmates. But that's an inconvenient truth, so let's gloss it over with a more palatable fiction. And where we can't find one, let's just look the other way. Would it surprise you to know that a lot of these transgender sex criminals are being sent to women's prison? Why is that? Because that's who they identify with, that's why. And it's got nothing to do with it being safer and easier in a woman's prison, because that isn't true. They still have to sexually assault the women in there, just like they did on the outside. Transgender sex offender Karen White attacked 2 inmates at a women's prison, HMP New Hall, while on remand. Its wigs, makeup and false tits were all supplied by the taxpayer to help her feel more like a woman when she was helping herself to feeling other women. Christ, it must have been like being attacked by Michael Caine in Dressed to Kill. A movie that will probably never see the light of day again because some transgender overlord has already condemned it as a film about a crazy trans woman killing sexually active cis women for the audience's visual pleasure, thereby reinforcing inaccurate stereotypes of trans people as dangerous and delusional, while simultaneously perpetuating a popular cinematic tradition of punishing women who break traditional sexual mores with death or severe trauma. What? I mean, what? I heard words, but no intelligible sound was actually made. This is what I heard. Same sort of sound I hear when people talk about the royal family, reality TV, or the angst of being transgender. But maybe that's because I don't work for the police, or the criminal justice system, or the press. Therefore, my brain hasn't been taken out and soaked in a bucket of piss, and I'm entitled to form my own conclusions. One of which is, and don't call me Mr. Transphobe, I think that some of these transgender criminals aren't transgender at all. They're just saying that to get a lighter punishment because they know that our pathetic police and fawning criminal justice system are just a little bit partial to minority credentials. Wayne Rogers, a male transvestite, was charged with assault by penetration, sexual assault and possession of a Class A drug in May 2020. Following the allegations being made to Hertfordshire Constabulary, the police issued an appeal in January 2020 for witnesses without mentioning the key identifying feature, that the suspect was a male dressed in women's clothing. They dodged mentioning the suspect's sex and physical description entirely because the police were more concerned with the hair-trigger sensitivities of a community of complaint artists than they were concerned about the public safety. Hertfordshire Police justified this by saying, "We do not want to be in a situation where members of the gay or trans communities in particular are being targeted by hurtful comments or actions as a result of this information being released." No, they'd rather the public put themselves in the situation of being potentially assaulted because the police are scared they might get slagged off on social media. Leicestershire Police also dodged the gender issue when they put out an alert for ex-soldier Tiffany Aitchin, aka Lee Baker, who was accused of stalking his then-girlfriend. The police described the suspect as 6'2", big built with hazel brown eyes and dark red hair, and recently transitioned. Don't you just love the way they assume that the language of transsexuals is so universal that the term recently transitioned is chucked out like it's a well-known brand? Can you just imagine what some old dear must think reading that? Recently transitioned? Does that mean he's moved home? And how about this paragon of femininity, Carol Lee, who was caught assaulting a teenage girl with a hammer during a rout over a parking space. Despite the whole sorry spectacle being caught on camera, and obvious to everyone who the offender was, the police arrested both parties and then put out a redundant PR notice, for no other reason it seems, except to tip their hat to all their woke hangers-on. We can confirm that 2 women from St Helens have been arrested following an incident in Stonedale Retail Park. Unsurprisingly, the assailant pulled the diplomatic immunity card and claimed that the incident was homophobia related and walked away from it with a £120 fine for possessing the hammer and an £85 fine for assaulting the teenager. It subsequently emerged that Carol Lee had been working for 5 years as a trainer to Merseyside police in areas of equality and diversity. Surprised? The only surprise there is how unsurprised I am by that. These are just a few examples of how you can get the police and the courts to go easy on you by uttering the magic spell of transgender. Their eyes light up, the kid gloves go on, and they fall over themselves in a bid to outdo each other in a pornographic display of virtue signalling that would make even Owen Jones cringe.
I've had enough of this. Let me go home.
Take stop and search, for instance. According to police guidelines, if you tell them that you're transgender, it throws an almighty spanner in the works as the search is halted while you get to call the shots. In every case, the force should respect the trans person requests as to what gender officer they are searched by regardless of availability. The potential for serious emotional damage to the trans person should not be underestimated. For such a person being searched by an officer of the same birth sex can be traumatic. In this case, the views of all parties to the search should be fully taken into account before reaching any decision on who should conduct the search. Well, given the transgender movement's rather expansive definition of gender, that person might be waiting quite a while for the police while they run around like their hair's on fire, trying to whip up the elected gender of choice, given the endless bill of fare published by yet another nameless, self-elected dictator of the gay mafia. On and on it goes, cataloguing 112 for the silly fuckers. So if you're ever stopped by the police and they insist on searching you, just tell them that you are recently transitioned and must be searched by a gender of your choosing. How about a bimagender? A gender that is profound, deep and infinite, meant to resemble when one mirror is reflecting into another mirror, creating an infinite paradox. And if they don't find one, you can sue them for the emotional damage it caused you. Police employees are so hypnotised by woke ideology that they're incapable of acknowledging just how stupid they look to the rest of us. I bet even the minority groups they claim to be supporting laugh at them. As for the criminals, they're falling about in hysterics, knowing that whatever criminal activity they engage in, the penalties of getting caught can be mitigated by invoking the new age diplomatic immunity. I'm not a criminal, I'm an oppressed minority, so I'm the real victim here. I only wish I could be there to see the cognitive dissonance registered on their stupid faces when the police arrest someone for a serious offence, only to find out that they're a proponent of their Marxist ideology. Oh, so you're not just an evil sex offender, you're transgender, which means I must be on your side, or that makes me bad, and yet your crimes are evil, but transgender is good. Sex offenders bad, transgender is good. I don't know, does not compute, error. Even RoboCop found a way of overcoming cognitive dissonance when his head was programmed with directives on how to understand criminals rather than tackle crime. Admittedly, his solution was a bit dramatic, but one that our modern-day police officers should consider trying. They want to snap out the spell of wokeness they've been placed under. But all this woke mania doesn't end with the police, because the courts are getting a piece of the action too. Our right-on judges are leaning into the wind, making sure that when they send someone down, they take into proper account all the associated politics of that person's offending. Trans personage Anna McComb was convicted at Bolton Crown Court in January 2021 for distributing indecent images. His computer was found to contain a total of 175 indecent images of children aged 5 to 14 years. Despite repeatedly offending, even after he was arrested, McComb escaped a custodial sentence and was sentenced to a 3-year community order. At trial, the judge referred to McComb's difficult and complex background, thereby acknowledging that pleading transgender is an accepted mitigation tactic guaranteed to get you favourable treatment. Matthew Burren, aka Alex Smith, was convicted at Swindon Magistrates in March 2021 for breaching a sexual harm prevention order. He'd already served a 16-year sentence for raping a 5-year-old boy. The judge suspended Burren's 26-week prison sentence because he was currently undergoing gender reassignment. The judge virtually fainted in adulation when sentencing Burren. You are very, very, very vulnerable. Got enough verys in there. That's the only reason I am not sending you to prison. If you were not vulnerable, I would probably send you to prison.
Notice to all sex offenders. If you don't want to go to prison, claim to be vulnerable. Further notice to all sex offenders. Vulnerable is interchangeable with transgender. End of broadcast.
Thankfully, not all judges are down with the kid glove narrative, and a fair few of them refuse to allow victim status immunity as an excuse for their crimes. But I'm sure judges like that have been earmarked for upgrade, and their replacements properly saturated in political ideology. Just like the 20,000 new recruits that have been fast-tracked into the police service, drawn deeply from the well of snowflakery and social media narcissism. And as we all know, that is a very shallow well indeed. What will it take for just a few police officers to wake up and ask out loud why their time is being spent enforcing minority ideologies rather than combating crime? But that won't happen because the police love this minority politics dictatorship that we live under. They know how deluded and spiteful it all is, but it's also oppressive and seeks to control behaviour on a mass scale. And that is something the police can get behind. They will serve anything that is authoritarian, official and oppressive because it reinforces the need for the police. After all, they'll be the ones issuing the commands and forcing the public to obey, and best of all, they get to blame those giving the orders as the true oppressors, when really it's just an excuse for the police to inflict their lust for power onto the rest of us. Just look at the way they adopted the COVID restrictions with total relish, using it as an opportunity to bully and harass ordinary people on the street in a way that they had never enjoyed before. They were always willing to improvise the rules, make up new ones, prosecute, fine and falsely imprison the public for whatever excuses their narrow minds could dream up. It wasn't the police's job to serve the government's lockdown initiative by force, but they did it willingly because they enjoyed it. Dishing out orders gives them a buzz. They get an adrenaline rush from putting the frighteners on people, ordering them around, making them do as they say. They don't care about all that law and order stuff, nor do they care about justice, hurt feelings, race, sex, or identity politics. All they care about is exercising their will upon others, and as they don't have any will, they're quite happy to exercise other people's instead. They won't say no to the minority groups, or no to the government, or no to anyone who seeks to exploit their resources as a means to silence critics, not because they can't say no, but because if they did that, where would the power to inflict fear and control on others flow from? They'd have to go out and find criminals and lord it over them instead. But that's far too splintered and cumbersome. Woke ideology gives them the opportunity to criminalise on a centralised, mass scale and then blame it on others for having done so. So don't heap all the blame on the woke brigade, festering pustules of spiteful intent that they are. They're just angry at the world because it's what it is rather than what they want it to be. But all they really do is light the fires. It's the police who bring the kindling, and it's the media who fan the flames. But it's the public who stand by watching idly as their country goes up in flames.